There we go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Record.
You got yours?
All right.
Yeah.
Recording.
We're recording now. So today we thought we would talk. This topic is going to be great for coaches and anyone who is interested in coaching to understand what could possibly go on in the coach's mind, especially when it comes to putting price on themselves. That's a really difficult topic for any coach to face. It's like one of the biggest challenges. Once you put a price on yourself, you feel a little easier, but then is it too much? Is it too little? We are human beings just like everyone else. We devalue ourselves all the time. And we have to remind ourselves of our worth and our value, reminding ourselves what we did, why we did it, what we learned, why we learned it, what we've gone through, all the challenges, all the obstacles, all the little hurdles, all the little potholes that we tripped over, all the ditches we ended up in. And that's how I, as a coach, remind myself of my value.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that?
Really similarly. I think about where I was before I hired my first coach and where I was about 6 months later, and then so on where I am now. Even 2 years, I remember 2 years before I decided to enroll in IPEC for coach training, I remember accessing this wealth of potential from within. And so it's all those kinds of experiences that I know I can attribute to that, my very first coach and those first 6 months of working with her. So I remind myself of that. And I remind myself of how much I paid. Like I paid then more than I charge now. And that's the question for me. Like, why do I do that? And why, and I know all my excuses. I know, oh, well, it's COVID and like people really need it right now. Nobody knows how to listen objectively. So I need to be available for them. And so it's, I know all the excuses I make up for not charging what deep down through my own experience, I know it's not even necessarily what I am worth, but I know what the process is worth. I say all the time that I would pay, if I had millions, I would pay my coach millions. My very first coach, I want to go back and here's $1 million. Thank you for changing my life and liberating me from these subconscious patterns that I just kept carrying around. I think I hired her when I was 28 for 28 years. And so that's kind of how I remind myself. I think about how much I paid her for the first 3 months, and then I renewed for another 3 months and kept renewing for about a year. And so I sit with that and think deeply about what's the difference here. And I can see again where I make up excuses. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm more of a spiritual coach, and she was more of a more realistic, tangible coach, and people find more value in that. And so just all kinds of excuses come up. But yeah, similarly, just reminding myself of the journey and how much I paid. And I've spoken with some people who want to become a coach but have not hired a coach ever. And I don't advise, it's their journey. But deep down, I know if they didn't think that they were worth it to hire a coach, they're going to have a really hard time charging when it comes time for them to charge.
Yeah. I like how you brought that point up, because that's exactly what happened to me and exactly what I did. Because I took an online, it was a very cheap program. It was written out, coach training program, and I learned that pretty much anyone can be a coach. That there is no, and I'm sure those things will change eventually. But even now, there's a lot of companies and people only hiring coaches that have certain kind of degrees and accreditations, right? So when I took that program, I was like so proud of myself. I'm like, yeah, I did it. Now I can be a coach. Now I am a coach. I'm like, wait, I have no experience with a coach. And then this thought came to mind. How can you tell everyone else that they need a coach or could use a coach when I have not even had a coach? Practice what you preach. This is something that I'm pretty sure every person has heard and at least once in their life. So I went out and I got myself a coach, Rachel. And exactly, right? And I went through, what was it? 2 weeks we were working together. And that's when I decided, that's it. I am going through IPEC training, because the coach program that I took didn't even scratch the surface. Like, it was just the basic explanation of what coaching is. Didn't give any tools, didn't give anything. And by the second week working with you, I already could tell that you had, pardon my language, you had a shit ton of tools and techniques and different things. I'm like, whoa, now this is what I'm talking about. And I've met other coaches, and I will tell you there's a big difference between IPEC trained coaches and any other coach. Huge difference.
Oh, I mean, sometimes I cringe listening to other coaches who were not trained with the same tools that we were trained with. I'll hear them asking close-ended questions, yes or no questions, and I'll cringe. And then I have to like detach their journey. But we're through IPEC, we are given these tools and they make so much sense.
Yeah.
That it's really like you can really hear the difference between working with a coach trained through IPEC, or similarly, like I'm sure there are other organizations that teach, only ask empowering, open-ended questions. And for anyone listening, what I mean by that is when Jan and I are working with clients, we'll ask, how does that make you feel? When was the last time you went through something like that? Well, what's different now? So all of those questions are open-ended. They're not yes or no questions. And that catalyzes some deep, thorough, inward excavation from our clients. And if we asked a yes or no question, we would be giving our clients an easy option so they could stay on the surface. They might not have to go that deep. And that's a binary option. There's an infinite number of options. And if we give a binary option, it might not even be accurate. And if we're working with someone, we ask a yes or no question, they might just give a yes or no answer, even if it's not really true or as deep as we can go. And so, there's definitely been times where I've heard other coaches coaching clients, and I just sat there like, ooh, this isn't how it's done.
I mean, there is a time when we ask close-ended questions, but it's so rare.
Yeah.
And even close-ended questions, like for me, typically it's whenever a client is already about to make a decision between the two things that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
This one, yes or no. This one, yes or no. Right? Simple. I was thinking, because most of the people that I work with are coaches, right? And this is something that they all struggle with. And that is finding value in themselves and putting themselves out there to get the clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, what did you do, or how did you put yourself out there? Because I know that was also a struggle.
It's been a journey. I think initially when I put myself out there, I created a website that has since expired. And I relied on social media and just putting my website on social media. I didn't put that much effort into putting myself out there. I remember feeling embarrassed, feeling I didn't feel supported and nourished on a physiological and psychological level. I was also going through a really tough time in my life recovering from narcissistic abuse, and that made it a lot harder because at any time I was about to take a step that would be putting myself out there, I had to heal all of the thoughts that that kind of abuse will cause. And and then since then, that was, I got my certification from IPEC about 2 years ago in September. And so since then, it's been a journey. And I realized that, I just got really clear and realized that I love being in groups. I love using my gifts and my coaching just in all these different ways. Ceremony, for example. I love holding space in ceremony. And it was through those in-person experiences that I would then be like, by the way, I'm a coach if you want to go deeper. And that was just more authentic to me than using social media. And then at this point, I am circling back to working with a team now to create a website. And then we will be using social media. And I think that it's that working with the team that is contributing to the value that I now hold for myself and what I do. So it's taken a long time. Something else that's affected my perception of the value that I offer is on this like conceptual level. I believe that our friends, like ideally, would have the gifts of listening to us objectively and advocating for authentic agendas. And it took me a long time to understand energetically, I don't have the energy to be that kind of friend for every single person I come across. And I had to, I'm still getting really clear on who's a friend, who's a client, and where do I draw that line where I say, no, you have to pay me for this energy. This is an energetic exchange, because I would witness myself holding space, alchemizing, and getting to the point where I'd have to ask, okay, I'm holding space for this person. Are they asking me about my life, my personal journey, what I've got going on? Are they asking me about my family relationships, the stressors in my life? And if it was a no, then I'd have to really think about the energetic exchange and where to draw boundaries and where to say, if you want to hire me as your coach, I am available, but I need to set some boundaries because I can't offer this kind of intimacy and openness for everyone, because it will, it will result in not being able to pay my phone bill and those kinds of stressors. So
Yeah.
yeah, that really, it's this, I think it's probably a limiting belief, or maybe it's the gremlin at play telling me that everybody deserves a friend like this, like a friend who can do what we do as coaches. And it caused me to play so small and just offer and offer and offer coaching services in exchange for friendship.
Yeah. And a lot of professionals, like for example, I'm thinking real estate agents. Are you going to expect a friend of yours who's a real estate agent to help you buy and sell a house for free at no cost? No, because it involves a lot of work. They know exactly how much work is involved. For us as buyer and seller, we might not see all the work that goes behind the curtain. Same thing with a coach. A person might not see all the work that goes behind the curtain. Like a perfect example is I would have a session with a client, and then my mind is still going for what happened in the session. We don't just shut off. Even if I have a client right after that one, my mind's still going on with that one. Right after I'm done with the second one or the third one, my mind is now on 3 people, and anything that comes to mind, I will send them a message and I will let them know what came to mind. So just because a session is 45 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, however long people choose to have a session for, doesn't mean that that's it. There's a little bit more behind it.
So much more.
Exactly, right? It's not the constant conversation afterwards, because we don't necessarily have that time. But once in a while, there can be a conversation aside from that, depending on the contract as well, right? But it doesn't shut off, just like with the client. When they're done the session, the work has just begun for them. And that's where the other part of the coaching experience, we as coaches, we want to address whatever they bring to the table, whatever they bring to the session, and get to the end result within that session. And if we don't, then we feel like we have failed. But that's completely understandable. And it's normal and expected for a human being, especially a coach, to go through those feelings and emotions. But remembering that for the client, that was just the beginning. That was just cracking a door or window open, and the rest they will do on their own. And that is part of the coaching process, not while we're with them, but what they can do on their own after we are not there anymore. Because we're not going to be holding their hand the whole entire life.
Right. It's actually the opposite. We want them to take on these tools and not need us anymore, and maybe need another coach for another aspect of their lives. Like maybe a coach comes to me for spiritual healing and then goes to you for more structure and accomplishing more structure, like tangible goals, whether it's doing like redoing their house, or like even something like clean out their closet, or so there's always different coaches for different aspects of our lives. But I love, like, coaches love when our clients don't need us anymore, because they've got the tools down. They've got the awareness of their thought patterns down. And going back to what you were saying about the session, just cracking the door, cracking the window open, even just being heard and acknowledge where they are. Some people have never been acknowledged where they are. So many people have just been told, don't feel that way or get over it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and can't move forward because no one's ever told them that what they're experiencing in that moment's totally normal and valid. And so that alone, there's so much value in even that first session. Like I remember my very first session with my coach, it wasn't even part of like the package. It was the initial complimentary session. And in that session, she asked what I wanted to work on. I was like, can I just tell you a story of something that happened? And she was like, sure. And I told her this story of something that occurred between me and my ex. And she was like, and all she said was, well, that sounds hurtful. And I started bawling, like sobbing. And I was like, it was so hurtful. And she pointed out that my voice, as I was telling the story, was devoid of emotion. I just told it monotone, because in that relationship, I had been trained to not express emotion one way or the other. And so when I expressed it to her and she said, well, that sounds hurtful, to have someone acknowledge it and then just let me feel hurt. That was new. I hadn't had that space held. Friends would just be like, well, fuck him, move on. And really just tell me what to do. And I was like, it wasn't helpful at that time. And so when I think about that, and I think about the energy levels, the levels of energy, she just by acknowledging where I was at and the emotion that I was entitled to feel, freed up so much energy that I could then move through. I could then get mad at him. And it was so, like so much work occurred just from that one moment of acknowledgement. Yeah. So valuable. And that's something that you compared. I love this comparison of the work we do to, if you're working with a real estate agent, they're your friend, you're going to pay them. And I've had experience in commercial real estate, both in a law firm and then specifically a commercial real estate firm. And in the law firm, I was trained to keep time. So like 0.1 to respond to an email. So that'd be a 10th of an hour, just like making up timesheets basically. And to keep track of our billable hours. And that to me, and then moving on to the commercial real estate firm, the bonuses I was getting based on my performance, which there was how much work I could crank out, how many reports I could write. And so I had to ask really deep within, why am I valuing that work, which was just systematic, status quo machine, like cog in a machine? Why would I value that work and think, okay, yeah, that's worth $250 an hour, or that's worth the bonuses I was getting? Yet when it comes to this deep emotional and spiritual work, and the work that is bringing health to the human psyche, which we so desperately need right now, why would I wobble and devalue that and not have that same sense of it is that valuable? Still don't charge as much as I would be making at a law firm. And I don't know if a lot of it could be based on, I think a lot of it is based on my fear that I'll say the price and someone will say, oh, I can't afford it. And then I'll feel so guilty that they're not getting the medicine that they need.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were explaining the physical labor that was involved in what you were keeping track of the time. And then knowing what coaching is, it's mental labor, right? Some of it is physical, note taking, connection, right? Writing, typing, things like that. Just a bit of it, but it got me thinking of the materialistic mind, like what we started talking in the beginning, and the spiritual mind, that so many people put value on the materialistic stuff, but put no value or very little value when it comes to the spiritual life, mind side of us, which is not really a side. Spiritual is all we are. As far as I'm aware, we're all born spiritual beings. And then we are taught to become materialistic with stuff and things and putting physical money tags on an email. Like, just to think that typing an email to someone might cost $200.
And in a law firm, it's just yep, that's just accepted. And going back to what you were saying about how it doesn't turn off for us, like in that kind of world, again, using real estate as an example, we can turn that off. I mean, at least I could turn it off and stop thinking about real estate when I was, going about my regular life. When it comes to this kind of work, we are doing deep psychological work, and we are traveling with someone. Like the energy it takes to go into someone's journey with them, fully navigate their story, collecting the essential bits. So coaches hear a lot of story, a lot of explanation, over explanation, and we see through the story to hear what the blocks might be. And
yes, and it's difficult in friendships as well now. I've definitely noticed that, and in relationships, because our ears are turned on to hear what the person is actually not hearing, what they're saying themselves. And it doesn't happen in one session, but little by little, we see their stories, what they're saying, how they're saying, and connecting the dots. Because I've had that with all of my clients, that all of a sudden this topic comes, I'm like, oh, perfect. Okay. So let's hear what you have to say about this. Can I make an observation? Yes, please go ahead. Right. Okay. Because like, please, I know this is the best part. This is when the truth comes out. And I get to learn more about myself. So it's like, okay, well, we had this topic before. This is what we discussed. This is what came out of it. This is what you've learned. Because sometimes they need a reminder, as we do as well. Right? And then we talked about this and this, and I'm just connecting the dots. So this connects to this, to this, to this, to this. No wonder you're feeling the way you're feeling, and you're not able to wake up in the morning, get through your day, get started, get anything done for the creation of your dream life, because of all of these other things. Right? And then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, that makes so much sense.
Because people invest in coaching when the patterns that they're repeating become intolerable, and they know they need a change. They don't know necessarily how to change it. So when they come to us, those patterns are still going, and it takes a lot of energy especially for coaches like us, who are empaths, recovering people pleasers, to hold up the mirror. It's bold to hold up a mirror to someone and say, may I make an observation? This is what I'm seeing. And because you know that they're going to experience that ego shock of, oh shit, I've been playing victim, or whatever it is. And so that in itself takes a lot of work. I actually realized that very recently, that I struggle with coaching men and have decided to only coach women, because that moment of holding up the mirror to a man I would brace for impact and feel all those same PTSD symptoms from previous relationships, and brace, seize up, because the ego, even when working with a coach, the ego still comes up and doesn't want to see what we hold up. And I found with women almost like crave it and want to see it. And recently working with a man, it did not feel that way. And it was early on in working with him, and the rest of our coaching relationship, I failed as a coach to hold up the mirror because I was afraid. And it's easy for me. My default is people pleasing, fawning, and I went back to that default. Still held space for whatever came through, still was able to champion, but I failed in terms of holding up the mirror because I was so scared. And so that, recognizing how much energy it takes for me to do that, I decided if I'm going to work with a man again, and I'm going to have to charge a lot more to hold myself accountable for providing the services that they're paying for. And in the meantime, I'm clearly still healing. And so working with women is where I'm continuing to focus, because I get such a different result. And of course, this is generalized. I know it's not every man, not every woman. It just happens to be that's the experience that I've had. And that value, there's so much value in having the mirror held up. And for us as the coach, especially empath coaches, it's not as easy as it might sound.
No.
It takes a lot of strength, a lot of confidence. Every time.
I sweat sometimes.
Same. I feel the adrenaline and I'm like, gotta do it. They'll thank me later. They might hate this for a moment, but it's just the ego. And that takes up so much work and preparation. And then also about going back to how we carry that journey with us, because it is so deep. The work we do is deeper into the universe than the story that comes through in the 3D. Like all the 3D stories are pretty much the same, fear and self-doubt, shame, guilt. We hear it all. And then what happens is we carry it with us, not in that we're taking it on, but everything, like the emotional work and spirit work, takes place so deep within the universe that everywhere we look, everything we see, we'll see something on TV and like, oh, this relates to my client. I'll hear a song and think, oh, I know she likes this artist, she could use this for deep inner child work. Like it just doesn't stop, because it's this intricate web where everything is connected.
And we're connected to that client as well, because that connection, once we initially connect, we are connected for a really long time. Even after the relationship ends, the connection is still there.
Oh yeah.
And like you're saying, basically gathering information for the client from everywhere, because it comes to us and we understand it and we interpret it, and then we can present it to the client whenever there's a call for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that alone, like if you had to put a value on that, can you like even try to can you even think of what value you could put on something like this?
I mean, to have someone, so also what we're doing when we do that is we are holding our clients' gifts. So, for example, early on, I knew that you had the gift of clairvoyance. The way that you told me about your dreams, your meditations, the imagery was so vivid. I was like, man, like she's a clairvoyant empath. And so working together, I would carry that gift, clairvoyance. And then anytime something powerful, whether it was a meditation with imagery or anything that I knew could tap you in that realm, I would think, oh, Yana would love this, or we could work with this in this session. And right now I have a client with a really strong gift of clairaudience. So I'm holding that, and when I hear song lyrics, or I'm thinking, okay, we could also use affirmations. Maybe I'll create a recording of myself saying affirmations, and it never stops.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we do. We are listening to what the client is saying in the story and what they're not saying. We're not only identifying the patterns, we're identifying their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't believe anyone has a weakness, because whatever we see as a weakness is actually a strength. If somebody wants to challenge me, let's have a chat about it, and then I will show you and help you see what you think is a weakness is actually a strength. So I believe none of us have any weaknesses, that everything is a strength. So what we're doing in the story or any conversation with the client, we're uncovering their gifts, their strengths, their superpowers, and like you said, reminding them of those things. Because as we all know, when it comes to ourselves, we are so quick to forget just how awesome we are. And that's why a coach doesn't forget. They remember these things because they see you as a unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
And they remind you that you are a unicorn. And if you need to hear why you're a unicorn, we remember. Mm-hmm. And we tell you, this is why you're a unicorn, and this is why. Now I've opened the door a little bit. Tell me why you think you're a unicorn now. Yeah. Right? Because you got to start to believe a little bit, and then they're able to see everything else.
I love that. It just reminded me that something else we're listening for are values. So embedded deep within the stories that we hear are the values that usually it's stories that have caused friction or tension or stress. And so when we hear these stories, or what we are hearing is a value that has been violated or infringed upon. And so then we can say something like, well, it sounds like respect and being treated with respect is very important to you. And that's something that is unique. I don't know of friends or family or just typical relationships where we can do that, because we do have in relationships, human relationships in general, there's so much emotional attachment. Yes. And something that I noticed when I first started working with a coach and having this objective perspective of me unconditionally loving, that's something else that I love about coach training, is it expands us to this place of unconditional love, and each and every client we see through that lens of unconditional love, and therefore we see everybody through that lens of unconditional love, because everybody is a potential client. And we see everybody on that soul level and spirit level. So what we see when someone comes to us is we don't see any spirit as better than or worse than, or like further along or less far along. We see the flickering light within, and depending on which blocks are stacked within that light, is how that will determine, like the blocks will determine how bright that light is shining, or how much of a flicker is left. And it could be just a tiny little flicker, like a match going out but clinging to whatever oxygen, still giving it fuel. And we focus on that flicker, and we keep bringing the client back to that light and reminding the client that's still there. That's who you are. That light is who you are. It's all these blocks, which are illusions. And as block by block, whether it's external blocks like projections from society, projections from family, or internal blocks like the gremlin that says you're not good enough, who do you think you are? We work through those, and the light gets brighter and brighter. And that goes for every single human being. So one person's glow is not any brighter, any duller than another person's, and their potential is not any greater, any less than any other humans. We have this access to the true potential in every being. And part of the hardest part of coaching is holding back on what we see. And just it's holding the flashlight for our clients to do that journey. We can't immediately project like, this is like, we can't tell them the talent we see in them is for them to just, I mean, we can to some degree, but it's really for them to uncover on their own. And, my coach didn't tell me right up front my gifts. She would continuously help me to feel strong and confident about myself, so that when I did realize the gifts within, I could stand sure-footed and not need any external validation.
Yeah, and discovering the gifts on your own, because essentially you are, as a client, doing it on your own with a little bit of guidance from the coach. But once you uncover those gifts on your own, then you can own them. Mm-hmm. Right? That's why we might be collecting and gathering and understanding all those things, but at the same time, not always giving you that plate of the food that we have collected. Mm-hmm. Because you didn't choose that food, you didn't find that food, you didn't put that food on the plate. We did that. So in order for you as a client to accept that food, you need to put that on your plate yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's how it also gets embedded in the mind and the body and remembered for longer, right? And I'm not saying that we don't point these things out, we do. What I'm saying is we don't sit and collect it all and then present it all at once, right?
Right. That would be so overwhelming. Like looking back, I'm sure my coach saw all of the issues, the karmic attachments that I was experiencing with my family, with my boss at work. And she probably, like now as a coach, I can tell she probably saw right through it and knew exactly what needed to be healed. And she held back because we know that it's an individual process for everyone. So had she told me, some questions we ask are, or we might ask in a worksheet. We love worksheets, but an assignment. So something that I might put in a worksheet or an assignment for a client, list 5 people you admire. So, and the reason for doing that is because what we admire in others exists within us, or else we would not have access to that perception through which we see those traits. So back when I answered those questions, the people that I admired then would be a very different answers to the people that I admire today. And I am sure my coach at the time read that and probably had an inner reaction or an inner response of, "Ooh, should she be admiring these people?" I
Now
was,
I'm curious, who was on that list?
well, so it was my dad and my oldest brother. And at the time, I needed to admire them because my admiration of them meant that I was successful in a Fortune 500 company. So the things that I admired and was seeking approval from them was were simultaneously propelling my journey in that career.
Mhm.
And my coach at the time, she didn't project anything. She left that journey up to me so that when I got to the point in my life where that kind of illusion dissolved in front of my face, this illusion that they were these men that I wanted to be just like, it was painful. And I would not have been ready to face that at any other time previously. I had to go through my whole journey of uncovering the self-loathing woman thoughts that I had, the behaviors that I had that showed that I really had no respect for myself or my body. And so had she held up the mirror, pointed out those things before I was ready, I would have shut down, cut her off, and like, how dare you? And I had to go through that process on my own. When I did get to that point, I had all the tools I needed within to let their image go and see them as the fallible humans that they are with their own karmic journeys, and that I was separate from them, and had the confidence, because of all the work leading up to it, I had the confidence to stand up for myself, for my individual sense of self, kind of reject the tribe, the family tribe. And and so it's such individual and mysterious work. It's a whole process, but the tools are the same, human to human. And so what we're doing is, along as we clear block through block by block, we're collecting the tools. And they may start with a coach, they may start very simple or very close to a situation, whether it's a situation at work. And then as we get deeper, it's safer to confront those issues with the family, with the ancestors, and deeper and deeper.
Mhm. Yeah, and I like how you said that basically every client is different, and it's not one shoe fits all,
Right.
right? The same tools, but they all fit differently for every client and for every situation within that client and that relationship. And there's a lot of tools to choose from that we have. I started going through the core dynamics. Yeah, it just came in last week, and I was like, oh my God, this is like a really thick book.
Wait a second. I don't think I have that book. Is it the spiritual, mental, emotional?
Yeah, I did doing the performance
Okay.
because I believe that every entrepreneur needs to know how to perform, even though there's also leadership one. I might do that one later. Of course, I'll have to pay for that. But I believe that performance is key to anything that we do. So performance, I'm not planning on working with athletes, but I believe entrepreneur is an athlete. A coach is an athlete.
Yep.
Every human being is an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so far, so good. Can't wait to finish it.
Cool. I mean, when we're not recording, I would love to hear more about that, because I have not seen that workbook.
Did you have an option to go through core dynamics? There was 4 niches. So there's leadership, performance, health and wellness, and then something spiritual. Can't remember what it was called.
I don't think so. I mean, we had the core energy homework, like the energetic presentation with the 6 influences on our energetic presentation, the spiritual, mental, emotional, environmental, physical, social.
Yeah, that's in there.
Okay.
Like, so basically all of them, the way they work, they're pretty much, the foundation is the same, but the language is different based on which niche you're going into.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
So check it out. You might have access to it because it was part of the cost.
Okay. I'll check it out. Thank
Yeah,
you.
sure. No problem. There's probably so much more and the hub available. Yeah.
I mean, they are upgrading that student hub constantly. So I don't doubt there's more available.
And
Like
there's
IPAC, hit up the old students.
yeah, and what they're also working on right now, just in case anybody's curious, and I know Rachel might be curious, is there's been a lot of people asking about this being available around the world, which means making it different languages, which means making it digital as well, especially the law of being, making a digital copy, and they're working on that.
The number of times I've asked someone if they have a way to play CDs, and they've been like, "What?" Because law of being comes on CDs.
Yeah, well, in a car, Xbox, PlayStation. Some people still have a Walkman or CD player. If there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
I remember when you asked me CDs, and I had to think, I'm like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think I have it in my car.
But the way that I approach that question too, let me ask you a question. Do you have a way to listen to CDs, compact discs? I know it sounds foreign. I mean, I bought myself a Walkman to listen to Law of Being, and so worth it. I mean, I still listen to those recordings over and over.
So why? Every day.
I love it every day.
I have it in the car. I have 6 slots for CDs. So the way, because I've listened to the first 3 CDs on repeat like so many times. So now I kind of switch them over, and every time I get in the car, it's playing, and my kids are like, "Mommy, can you put some music on?" I'm like, "Nope." No, but the thing is, I know it's still, even though they might not be listening and paying attention, they're learning.
Yeah.
And this is the stuff that can help them in the future as well.
Yeah. I mean, I just have so much faith in the future because of parents like you, and some of my clients are parents as well, and just the way that we're seeing how we really are leading by example, and kids don't do what we tell them to do, they do what we do. So something like that, even just prioritizing mental, emotional, spiritual health, and physical health, prioritizing health and wellness, to have children witnessing their mom doing that, like that's going to teach them so much about self-worth without them even realizing.
Yeah. And that also kind of reminded me a little bit of like our daughter, she wanted a watch, right? And of course, the watch that she ended up picking has a step counter in there. It has the heart rate and the blood pressure. I mean, it's like fancier than mine. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of options for a 10-year-old. And then I kept thinking, maybe it's too much. Maybe she's too young for this kind of stuff. She doesn't need to know. And then I remind myself, I'm like, if I was given that opportunity at 10 years old to learn what it takes to be healthy, how many steps I need, the heart rate, the good heart rate and the bad heart rate, since we like to label good as good and bad, what difference would it have made in my life? It would have made a tremendous difference just knowing what it takes to be healthy and learn and have that much year of experience. practicing that craft of what it takes to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So, did I make a good decision with buying her that step counter watch? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Just a
Yeah.
oh, and also before I forget, ELI,
Mm-hmm.
the questions, the way they're phrased, there's a reason behind it. And what they're trying to do is make it in different languages available for people around the world, so that way they too can answer those questions based on their language. Because at IPEC, we have coaches that speak like multiple languages, or they choose to, like, for example, one of my peers, she's Brazilian, but she lives here with her family and everything, but her clients are all Brazilians.
Yep.
Now, translating ELI to Brazilian, it's not an easy feat, and she can't actually do it herself, because that's not how ELI works. We know that. But she can't wait for all of those things to be done so she can introduce it to her clients.
Oh, awesome. That's so great to hear. Go IPEC. Yeah, one of my peer client when going through IPEC, she's Portuguese, and her focus area, her niche or niche is people for whom English is their second language, and immigrants and refugees, people who were not born in America but are here now, and so that's exciting because she's also still in the corporate sector. She stayed within a corporate environment to change the culture there, and advocate for non-English speaking people, or English speaking, people for whom English is the native tongue, to advocate for people who speak other languages primarily, and learned English upon coming here. And she just notices how much they're discriminated against. And, she said things like, Americans talk to her like she's stupid, and she's like, I'm really smart. And like, I know she's really smart. She knows she's really smart, but it's really, yeah. Really interesting niche, and that's so great to hear that that's going to be available.
Yeah.
All sorts of languages.
Yeah, I can't wait for all that to happen. Mind you, my clients are English speaking, but I would imagine, being in Canada, we have a lot of people who, like, Canada is made up of a bunch of immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Canada is. It's multicultural. There's not that much discrimination and racism going on here in Canada, but it still is, right? Especially depending on where you're living as well. And there's a lot of people who don't even speak English, even if they've lived here their whole entire life. My husband's uncle, for example, he lived in Canada for 40 or 50 years. And up until he passed away, he barely spoke English. Right? Even with me, it was always kind of like Portuguese, and then you had a translator, my mother-in-law. But it was very, like, after a while, you get to learn the language a little bit, certain things that they say. And I mean, there are lots of people like that in Canada that don't see the need to learn the language of the country they're living in. And there's nothing wrong with that. If a person like that wants coaching and the program is not available in their language, that becomes challenging.
Yeah.
Right? Even for a coach, translating it and then translating the debrief of the ELI. I mean, that's the other thing they're doing as well. But That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. I mean, I just love it so much. I feel like the ELI is just this language that unites science with feeling and science with spirituality in such a way that it's accessible to anyone. And we can just look at ourselves, witness ourselves as objectively as if we were scientists looking at a human, saying, oh, okay, so this is what happens. The human has this thought, let's say, I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And as the ELI offers that that lens, that objective lens, to say, okay, so I'm not good enough is the thought. The feeling that comes up is helplessness or unworthiness or anxiety or depression or sorrow, grief, whatever it is. And we can look at that objectively and say, okay, well, that makes complete sense because our thoughts dictate our emotions, and then our emotions dictate how we show up in the world. So if the thought is, I'm not good enough, we're not going to put in the effort or engagement to accomplish whatever it is we're making up that we're not good enough for. And so to have this language worldwide, available worldwide, this language of is a language of quantum physics. And I mean, it could just be so just as helpful as studying the 7 chakras. And I actually heard the 7 chakras described in a way recently that I was like, oh my gosh, like I know we're trained to keep them separate. They're 2 different modalities. But the way that I heard them described recently in this, it was this, I don't know if you know the artist Alex Gray, but he was describing a painting and went through each chakra and described each chakras in such a way that I was like, oh, this is like so aligned with energy leadership.
Yeah.
And the 7 levels of energy.
Level 7 is right here.
Exactly. And the third eye, like the level 6, intuition comes alive. When we're talking about level 6, we know that's where intuition comes alive. And that's when we see through the third eye, we're perceiving through our intuition and perceiving the deeper meaning behind everything.
And all the lower levels are where all the blocks are, and they are all the lower chakras where all the blocks are being carried below, like waistline.
Exactly, like the root chakra.
Mm-hmm.
So connected to level 1. If we're experiencing an imbalance in the root chakra or blocked root chakra, we're probably entertaining many level 1 thoughts. Something that I noticed was if I'm experiencing an imbalance in the solar plexus, the 3rd chakra, I exhibit it in either level 1 or level 2 thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And so that makes total sense. And because the solar plexus is where our willpower comes from. And an imbalance is either expressed as an overexpression of willpower or an underexpression of willpower. So the overexpression of willpower might come out as anger, and the underexpression might come out, and anger is level 2. The underexpression might come out as apathy, self-doubt, worry, which is level 1. Freezing, fawning. So just really connecting all those dots and being able to see how in every modality it's basically the stress responses are the same: fight or flight, freeze, fawn.
Mm-hmm.
And healing those, bringing attention to those, and giving ourselves that sacred pause between thought and action can be the same in every modality. I just love the 7 levels of energy just because it's straight science. It's just straight quantum physics, like expand, contract. It was like everything else in nature. We expand and contract.
Yeah. that got me to remember, as we were talking about chakras. There's a show I started watching on Netflix called Cabin with Bert Kreischer or something. I can't pronounce the last name. And he shows these quotes and that come up, right? So this one says, "The human body is the best picture of the human soul." Tony Robbins.
Wow. Okay.
So that got me thinking that by simply looking at a person and their body, we can see what goes on inside in the soul, right? For example, when we experience blockages in the lower chakras, we carry a lot of weight in those areas, right? So the body speaks for the soul of what's going on. When we are insulating ourselves, then we're just trying to hide and become invisible. And I'm speaking from experience, from myself, when I was more overweight than I am now. And that was me hiding and trying to disappear and not be seen and not be noticed. So nobody would see me or talk to me and or hit on me and all of these things, right? Because I didn't believe it was worth it.
I think that, yeah, you just hit the nail on the head, is that self-worth. I had a similar experience when I was at my most depressed, except I wasn't eating and I weighed like 90 pounds. It was very underweight and it showed. And it goes back to, well, one, self-worth. I didn't think I was worth the food. And I also, I wanted to hide. I didn't want anyone to see me. So I was literally disappearing, like trying to make my body disappear. And also it was the one thing I could control. Like I couldn't control anything else, but I could refuse food. And so that definitely showed up in my body, this desperate clinging. It was like clinging to survival while also losing my survival instinct.
Yeah.
Of feeding myself.
Screaming out for help silently by not eating.
Yep.
And for me, I also wasn't eating. I was punishing myself with food for not eating because I had a really absurd money story. Yeah. My money story was as simple as this: you didn't make money, didn't bring money in, the food is not yours, you didn't pay for it, so you don't deserve to eat it. So I wasn't eating it until my husband was home, and he doesn't know the story, right? Unless he watches this. Because the thing is, so anyways, they would get home and I felt like once I felt that I was allowed to eat, I would eat, even though it was all in my head. You know what I mean? It was all in my head that he's working, he's bringing money in, it's his food, his stuff, not mine. I didn't pay for it, can't eat it. And then in the evening, when I felt like I was allowed to eat, I would eat and eat and eat and try to fill my soul back up, only to wake up in the morning again and start that roller coaster again. And that's where I was gaining all the weight from binge eating one time a day. And it's some days it was almost like a vacuum cleaner where I would just put anything I possibly can because I felt good about myself and deserving of that food, so I would eat it.
I wonder how many women and empaths feel that way in our households. Like, we didn't make the money that brought the food home, so we are not worthy of eating it. I wonder just how many that story is true for, because that's exactly the story I was telling myself when I weighed 90 pounds, like I was living with a partner who made so much more money than I made, and for the most part wouldn't bring up my lack of contribution. But when things got stressful between us and communication got stressful, he would use it as ammunition. And that moment in which it was used as ammunition would never leave me. It would stay with me. So even when things were going well, and not, I mean, going as well as they could in that kind of controlling relationship, but even when things seemed to be going well enough that you would think I wouldn't be feeling that stress, I would have that story of, he makes all the money, I barely contribute. It would never leave me. And and I mean, his pointing it out, like, we know when we're in a relationship and one person makes more money than the other, we are well aware. So to have it pointed out really feels like conditional love.
Yes.
And that support, that nourishment, that life-giving nourishment is only available to us under certain conditions. And if we're not abiding by those certain conditions, that support's taken away. And it's really, it takes so much work to heal from that kind of conditional love and support.
Because that feels, first of all, conditional, and it feels like a huge loss, which a loss is also kind of equals death, right? And little by little, I mean, I still have that story in my mind once in a while, right? And I know that once, because one of my biggest goals is to retire my husband, so he can go through the journey that I did of battling his self-worth when it comes to not bringing money in. And that way, and it's kind of like, oh my God, Yana, that's so evil of you. But right now, he doesn't understand that part, that challenge where you were bringing something in and you felt like you were part of the system that we have in the house and contributing or being the biggest contributor, to going from that to now not contributing and doing things around the house and chores around the house, taking care of the kids. We don't get paid for that. And we tend to base our self-worth and our value on how much we make. And this is the materialistic mind that pretty much everyone was raised with, unless they grew up in a forest.
Yep, unless we were raised by like shamanic elders. We, like, as soon as we graduate college, we're asked, what are you going to do to make money? Or even before that, maybe it's as soon as we turn 16 and are old enough to work, you have to get a job. How are you going to pay for that? And that's like the how are you going to pay for that story is just embedded into our minds real early. And instead of, why is whatever it is that we need to pay for, why is that important to us? So, you know, when I was 16, it was gas for the car. And so I needed to get a job so I could pay to fill the car with gas. And I spent more time focusing on that than why is having a car, why is mobility important to me? Why is this freedom important to me? Why is, you know, seeing my friends important to me? And it's just very young. How are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for school? How are you going to pay for health insurance? Just all this story that, without us even having the time to pause and evaluate how these stories are working out for us and how our culture is working out for us, we're just ushered in to this system of indentured servitude based on this story that you're going to dedicate yourself to a company for a certain amount of years and then you're going to retire and enjoy your retirement. And that story just doesn't work.
I think it actually starts a lot earlier when the child is being asked, who do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
So that starts, I mean, for my kids, my son wants to be a construction worker based on based on what he said in Jake SK. He has a little picture of him in his little outfit, graduation of SK. Who do you want to be? Construction worker. And I mean, I don't know any parents that want their child to be a construction worker, but there are many construction workers out there. And if I could kiss the ground they walk on, I would, because that is not an easy job by all means, but someone has to do it.
Someone has to do it.
Yeah. Anyways, I gotta hop on a call in a couple of minutes. This awesome topic, and I hope coaches and people who are looking for a coach found this interesting.
Yeah, likewise. And I would love to return to this topic of women and households and self-worth. We could dive into. I would be open if anybody listened to it and it resonated. If anyone felt seen and understood by that, I'd be open to returning to this topic next week, because there is a whole, I mean, there's endless digging and excavation in this.
Yeah, it's huge. Like, there is so much to it. But just know that we get you, we understand you, and we're here for you.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, you are acknowledged and validated, and everything that you're going through has a purpose.
Yeah.
It really does. I can't tell you what it is because I'm not you, but you can figure that out, because this is just a seed that got planted, right? Now, if you want to water it, you water it, and you can figure out why you're going through what you're going through, because there's something incredible on the other side of it. I can guarantee you that. At least it has been for everyone that I have talked to, come across, that has gone through challenges, struggles, battles, sometimes felt like a war that they were going through, that there was something beautiful on the other side of it.
Something that Kelsey, our friend Kelsey, says when she ends yoga or meditation, she'll say, know this, the light at the end of the tunnel is not an illusion. The tunnel is. That's really what we help with, is looking at those parts of the tunnel and helping to dissolve it.
Yeah.
On the way, maintaining that beacon of light that we're heading for.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would add is that I can't remember where I heard it, but there is no pain in suffering. That suffering is also an illusion. And when I heard it, I thought, are you kidding me? There's a lot of pain and suffering. All I feel is pain when I'm suffering. But pain is an illusion. Suffering is an illusion. Time is an illusion. The world, everything is an illusion. Our experiences, in a sense, are illusions as well. So it's a challenging concept to really grasp and understand, especially when we are going through the pain and suffering.
So I heard a different one that's in part of law of being. Actually, it's there is pain, there is no suffering, and it's the suffering comes from attachment to the pain. So if we think about times when, let's say we have a headache and our thoughts are just obsessing about the headache, and I'll say sometimes when I have cramps, I'll say outrageous things like "kill me now," and that's where the suffering comes from my attachment to the cramps. Like, I just can't let it go. I'm obsessed with them, and that's the suffering. I live with someone. My partner has chronic pain from having gone through back surgery and has a fused spine. When he goes through pain, he does not suffer. He detaches completely somehow maintains his positive disposition. And so that's, I mean, it's really like pain is inevitable. And actually, IPEC Foundation principle is that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So it does, yeah, as you were saying on it, it sounds far-fetched to internalize that. And and that's what really, where wisdom comes from, is experiencing the pain and perceiving the value in it. And something that I just real quick, something that we learned about back when I was in college, I took Neuroscience 101, and we learned about a case of a girl who didn't have the receptors in her brain to notify her that she was in pain, and she died really young. And after learning that, I was like, wow, pain is life-saving, because something as simple as shifting our weight when we're uncomfortable, the pain alerts us to shift that weight. And you know, if putting our hand down on a hot surface, the pain alerts us, don't do that. So the value, I mean, that's an easy example, thinking about the physical value of experiencing those kinds of pains, but there's also deep value in the psychological shadows and the pains that we experience and come out on the other side feeling, you know, we feel loss, we feel love, we feel sorrow, we feel joy. So
yeah, which basically means it has a purpose.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Awesome. This was, once again, really awesome. Now my throat is starting to tickle a little bit. So I'm going to go and drink some water because the coffee is not helping it anymore. And until next week.
Until next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone who listens.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Until next time.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.